You ever see someone kick over a disabled man's fishing bucket and think, yep, today's the day someone learns what a bad idea that was? Well, pull up a chair. Because the morning they banned my dad, my wheelchair-bound, stroke-surviving father, from fishing on the lake he'd kept alive for decades, something snapped in me. I stood up there on our Montana ridge, watching the HOA call his wheelchair unsightly, not even realizing the lake they claimed was theirs actually belonged to us. An 800-acre lake, older than any bylaw they'd ever scribbled on HOA stationery. That was the moment doubt turned to tension, and tension lit the fuse of a fight nobody on their side saw coming. If you've ever stared down an HOA, or just stood your ground for something that's yours, drop a yes in the comments. Trust me, you're about to see what happens when justice decides to clock in for overtime. The sun always came up soft over our Montana Lake Ranch, like the world itself was taking its first breath, golden light skating over water, ribbons catching on ripples, a hush in the mist. That lake had belonged to my family for 4 generations. And in those quiet dawn hours when the world was still, it felt like the land itself remembered us. The dock creaked under my dad's wheelchair, same wooden groan I'd heard since I was a kid. Dad sat near the edge in his brown canvas jacket, holding that old rod steady, peaceful, like the world made sense again. After his stroke, mornings were all he had. The doctor called it routine neurological stimulation. I called it healing. He barely spoke these days, but you put a rod in his hand, and he'd track the water like it was the last good thing in life. I always liked to think the lake remembered him too. It owed him, honestly. I was fiddling with a flow sensor near the tree line, tightening a bolt, when I heard the rumble of tires, gravel crunching. Nobody ever came down this path at dawn. Not unless you were part of the land. But this wasn't a land person. This was HOA business. You can smell their type a mile away. Never up before their smart coffee beeps, but always up in someone else's business. 3 sets of footsteps, fast, irritated. Dad didn't turn around, probably hoping if he ignored them, they'd float away. But HOA folks don't float, they invade. Excuse me, a voice so sharp it could slice drywall. What exactly do you think you're doing out here? I wiped lake mud off my hands, staying behind the tree line for a second. Dad didn't answer. His jaw just clenched, a muscle in his cheek twitching, the side that worked best. He gripped the rod tighter. I said, "What do you think you're doing?" This dock is part of the Serenity Bluff HOA Recreation Zone. Fishing is prohibited without board approval. I finally stepped out where I could see them. There she was, Bethany Reed, HOA president, hair pulled so tight you could tune a piano with it, powder blue blazer crisp enough to slice burlap, fake smile sharpened by years of telling people their fences were half an inch too tall. 2 guys trailed behind her, HOA Lake Patrol, which is just a fancy name for neighbors who like authority and hate training. Dad tried to speak, "Ma'am, I'm just," but before he could finish, Bethany kicked his little plastic bucket off the dock. It hit the water with a hollow gulp. There, one less eyesore, spoiling the view for residents. This is private water. You can't just set up here with your equipment. Dad's hand shook on the reel. I felt my chest twist, anger hard and cold. Unsightly medical devices. Bethany went on, pointing at his wheelchair. Not an appropriate location. And that rod violates Section 12C of the HOA's water standards. Fishing is strictly forbidden. One of the patrols stepped up like he wanted Dad to argue. Dad didn't. He just stared at the water, breathing slow, trying not to lose what little control he had left. That was it. I stepped out, boots thudding on the dock. All 3 heads turned, sunlight painting them in gold. I was still muddy from the sensor work. Bethany's eyes narrowed. She always hated seeing me, hated that some of us belonged to the land, not to her bylaws. Oh, the sun. Remington Cole. She made my name sound like mildew. You're trespassing too, you know. Trespassing? On my own lake. I went to my father, laid my hand over his. His breathing slowed. Then I looked at Bethany. Why do you think you own this lake? She blinked. First time she'd been caught off guard all morning. But the wind shifted, pine and dew drifting across the dock, and I swear you could feel the land itself, heavy with memory. She had no idea the ground she stood on wasn't hers, and no idea what she'd just started. Bethany snapped her fingers at one of her patrols, who handed her a folder. Here, she said, shoving a stack of papers at me. A formal violation notice. You and your father are in breach of the Serenity Bluff Recreational Water Standards. Section 12C, subsection F, fishing prohibited. $950 fine. My jaw clenched. Dad's shoulders slumped. Ma'am, please. I've fished here since. She cut him off with a wave, like she was shooing a bug. Not anymore. This lake is under HOA jurisdiction. I won't have unsightly activities disturbing the shoreline aesthetics. She stared at his wheelchair like it was a leaking trash bag. I took the packet just to keep her from throwing it at my father. The bottom line? $950 for unauthorized use of HOA property. She went on about how residents pay good money to live near curated water. Curated, like my family's lake was a museum display. A bird screeched in the trees behind me, sharp and lonely. Dad's breathing went shallow. I knelt beside him. Let's go home, Dad. As we turned, Bethany called after us. And keep him off the dock, or I'll call the sheriff. Final warning. That walk back was the longest half-mile of my life. Sunlight through the pines, porch coming into view, home never feeling less safe. Inside, I helped Dad into his chair by the window, where he could still see the lake. His eyes followed the water like he was searching for a lost part of himself. I didn't mean trouble, he whispered. Just the fish. I know, Dad. You didn't do anything wrong. But something nagged at me. I went to the bookshelf, grabbed the old family binder. Coal Water Trust, 1899. Deeds and patents. Yellowed pages, great-granddad's handwriting. I found a federal land patent. Our property, designated as watershed buffer, protected since before anyone in this HOA was even born. The lake wasn't theirs. It was ours. Legally, undeniably, they had zero jurisdiction. Bethany had no clue she'd just banned the only man keeping her precious HOA lake alive. She had no idea what she'd set loose. I folded the land patent gently, laid it on the table. Then I tore her violation notice in half. Next morning, I didn't take Dad to the dock. I fed him breakfast at the table instead. He kept glancing at the lake, confusion dark in his eyes. The fish someone has to every morning for 20 years, Dad managed that lake. Algae, carp, pump clogs, balance. To him, it was instinct. To the HOA, just a postcard. By noon, the HOA's group chat was in meltdown. Residents were panicking, water pressure dropping, pools cloudy, showers weak. You doing something up there, Remy? I ignored them. Instead, I checked the old water testing kit, walked up to the observation post on a ridge. The lake was too still, its shine too glassy. That's how you know trouble's coming. Through binoculars, I spotted Bethany's joggers sniffing at the water, backing away. The shoreline was already thickening with green, algae growing out of control without Dad's routine, natural maintenance. The pump system wasn't made for this. The HOA wanted a lake that looked good in photos. The lake itself didn't care. Afternoon, I got a text. Jake Mercer, Bethany's water expert, was at the pump house, wrestling with the controls. The pump started screaming, then howling. I warned him, but he cranked the pressure anyway, trying to force the system through the choking sludge. Bethany, red-faced, barking orders, ignored all warnings. The pump exploded with a boom that echoed across the valley. Black smoke poured from the roof. People screamed, water stopped. Nature sent its warning. They refused to listen. By morning, the entire valley stank of rotten watermelon. The lake looked bruised, swirling green scum. Birds circled, dogs refused to drink, the water didn't move. Then came the angry mob, dozens of neighbors and HOA members, Sheriff Hale, and all. Bethany had a megaphone, demanding I explain myself, accusing me of sabotage. Sheriff asked for evidence. I handed him property camera footage from my USB, showing me nowhere near the pump house except to warn Jake. The real culprit was negligence, raising the pressure on a dying system. The crowd, all panic and outrage, turned. Bethany lost her grip, blamed Dad's buckets, called us poisoners. But people remembered she'd called the chair unsightly, kicked his bucket, humiliated him. Now the murmurs shifted. Then Bethany snapped. She ordered Jake to breach my fence with his excavator to tap the creek upstream, right through federally protected land. Sheriff warned her. She didn't care. Jake hesitated, but Bethany screamed, "Cut the fence." The bucket slammed into our land. That was it. I pulled my emergency satellite phone, dialed U.S. Watershed Command. Active breach of a federally protected watershed zone, I reported. The valley froze as black helicopters appeared over the ridge. Federal agents, watershed enforcement, Army Corps. They landed like thunder, SUVs roaring up the road, agents in windbreakers swarming the broken fence. The federal director himself strode up, saluted me. Commander Cole, they called me, recognizing the oldest water trust in the county. Bethany blustered, but the law had finally arrived. She was arrested on the spot. Environmental sabotage, illegal diversion, fraud. The crowd gawked, shame and shock blooming as truth replaced panic. Sheriff Hale reviewed the evidence. I explained to the crowd, for 20 years, my dad had maintained their lake for free, removing invasive carp, balancing the ecosystem, keeping their pumps alive. Bethany had banned him. Nature responded. With the HOA dissolved, we reopened the original 1930s gravity-fed bypass. Neighbors, humbled, dug through layers of bark and soil to unearth the old valve. It took work, patience, the hydraulic wrench Bethany once mocked. But when the valve turned, the lake pulsed with life again, water rushing back through the old pipes, sprinklers sputtering, residents cheering, some in tears. The community had survived. The HOA as they knew it did not. The legal fallout swept Bethany away. But more important, neighbors found each other again, not as subjects, but as people. The lake would heal, balance returning. The lesson landed quietly. You can't curate nature, can't legislate stewardship, can't bully balance. Truth demands respect. As weeks passed, the water cleared, new reeds grew, and the fish returned. My dad, quiet, proud, sat the dock, holding his rod bucket beside him. Folks came by, thanked him, signed a petition to dissolve the old board, and appointed a new trust. Kids fished, families laughed, real community blossomed where vanity once reigned. Bethany? She'd face her charges, her power gone. The beautiful view she'd fought for wilted because she never respected what made it beautiful. And the most valuable thing, Dad said, isn't the view from your window, it's the truth beneath it. So if you still believe land, family, and fairness matter in this country, drop a simple yes below. And if you want more stories where justice stands up for the quiet folks, go ahead and subscribe. Now, here's a question. Is it ever okay to fight back when power crosses the line? Or does that just make you part of the same cycle? Tell me below, or share your own experience, because these stories and their lessons don't end at the water's edge.